My husband smiled when he placed the divorce papers on the kitchen table. That was how I knew he thought he had already won. Not because he looked angry. Anger would have meant there was still something alive between us. Not because he looked sad. Sadness would have meant the marriage had once mattered enough to mourn. Number. Caleb Westbrook looked relaxed, almost pleased. He stood across from me in the kitchen we had built together, wearing the navy suit I had steamed for him the night before, and slid the folder toward me like he was handing over a restaurant menu. Then he said, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Elise." I stared at the folder. My name was printed on the top page. Elise Westbrook. Soon, if Caleb had his way, even that name would be taken from me. Behind him, his mother, Marjorie Westbrook, sat at my breakfast counter drinking tea from my favorite mug. She had not been invited. She had come early that morning with her pearl earrings, her cold smile, and a handbag full of opinions she had been waiting years to open. Beside her stood Noelle Mercer, Caleb's business consultant. That was what he had called her for months. A consultant. The kind who texted him after midnight. The kind who knew the passcode to his office. The kind who wore a white silk blouse in my kitchen and looked at my marriage like it was an old chair waiting to be thrown out. Caleb tapped the folder once. "The house will stay with me," he said. "The company too, obviously. You'll get a small settlement, enough to start over somewhere simple." Somewhere simple. As if simplicity was a place he was sending me back to. As if I had not been the woman who worked 3 jobs when his first company failed. As if I had not slept on a mattress on the floor while he chased investors. As if I had not used my own savings to keep his dream breathing, when every bank treated him like a risk. I looked at him, then at the papers. "You already decided all this?" He sighed. The way men sigh when they want to make cruelty sound like maturity. "Elise, we both know you can't maintain this lifestyle alone." Marjorie smiled into her tea. Noelle looked down, but not because she felt shame, because she was hiding satisfaction. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice into the tone he used when he wanted to sound kind in front of witnesses. "I know this is hard, but be honest, you don't really have anywhere else to go. You don't have the income to fight me. You don't have the family money. You don't have the kind of support system that can carry you through something like this." Then he paused and said the sentence he would regret for the rest of his life. "You'll beg to stay before the week is over." The kitchen went quiet. Even the clock above the pantry seemed to stop. For 16 years I had swallowed. Swallowed insults. Swallowed loneliness. Swallowed his mother's little cuts. Swallowed Noelle's perfume on his jacket. Swallowed the way Caleb began saying "my company" after years of calling it "our future." But that morning, something inside me refused to swallow one more thing. I stood. Caleb blinked, surprised by the movement. I walked past him, past Marjorie, past Noelle, and opened the drawer beside the sink. Inside was a brass key with a blue ribbon tied around it. My father's key, the one I had not touched since the day he died. Caleb looked at it and laughed softly. "What is that supposed to be?" I picked up my handbag. Then I looked at him for the last time as his wife. "You're right about one thing," I said. His smile returned. "You finally understand." "Yes," I said. "I do need somewhere else to go." Then I turned toward the door. Caleb's smile faded. "Elise." I did not stop. "Elise, don't be dramatic." I opened the front door. Behind me, Marjorie said, "Let her go. She'll be back by dinner." Noelle laughed under her breath. I stepped out into the morning sun with nothing but my handbag, my father's key, and the kind of calm that only arrives when a woman has finally finished being afraid. By dinner, Caleb was still waiting for me to call. By midnight, he was angry. By morning, he was nervous. And within 3 months, the company he thought belonged to him would start collapsing from the inside because the woman he expected to beg was the only reason his whole world had ever stood. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from tonight. And if you have ever been pushed so far that silence became your strength, stay with this story. Because sometimes the person who walks away quietly is not losing the fight. Sometimes she is simply removing the foundation. My name is Elise Westbrook now. But before marriage turned my life into a room where I was always expected to stand near the wall, I was Elise Hart. I was raised in a small brick house behind my father's repair shop in Augusta, Georgia. The shop had a crooked sign that said Hart and Daughter Repairs, even though for most of my childhood I was too small to repair anything except torn doll dresses and broken crayons. My father, Malcolm Hart, fixed everything: radios, lamps, old clocks, sewing machines, garden tools, children's bicycles. He had hands that could bring dead things back to life, and a patience that made people trust him before he said a word. He was not rich. At least, that was what I believed. He wore work shirts with oil stains. He drove an old green truck. He kept receipts in coffee cans and wrote notes on cardboard because he hated wasting paper. He could have bought new shoes, but he resold the same pair until my mother said they had more memory than leather. My mother, Diane, died when I was 14. After that, the shop became our home in more ways than one. I did homework at the counter while my father worked behind the bench. Customers brought casseroles after her funeral, then slowly stopped coming for grief and returned for repairs. Life did that cruel thing it does. It continued. But my father never made me feel alone. Every evening, after closing the shop, he made dinner and asked me 3 questions. What did you learn today? What did you notice today? And what did you ignore today that you should have faced? I hated the 3rd question. Children prefer easy love. My father gave deep love. He believed noticing was a form of protection. Elise, he used to say, tightening screws on old radios. Most things do not break all at once. They loosen first: a marriage, a machine, a business, a promise. If you listen early, you can hear the rattle before the wheel falls off. I thought he was talking about machines. My father was almost always talking about people. When I was 19, I discovered he had been saving money for me in a blue tin box under the floorboard beneath his workbench. Not much. Enough for community college tuition, books, and a little left over for emergencies. I cried when he gave it to me. He said, "Don't cry over money, baby. Cry over love if you must. Money is only a tool." Then he added something I never forgot. Never marry a man who treats tools better than people. I wish I had remembered that sooner. I met Caleb Westbrook when I was 24. He came into the repair shop carrying a broken antique desk lamp, though later I learned the lamp did not belong to him. It belonged to the office where he worked, and he had taken it without asking because he wanted an excuse to come in. He had seen me the week before at the coffee shop next door. That should have sounded romantic. At the time, it did. Caleb was handsome in the clean, bright way ambitious men can be, before life teaches them humility, or pride chooses not to learn it. He had dark hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that made strangers feel selected. He wore business shirts, even though he was only a junior sales associate at a small logistics firm. He spoke like success was not a dream. It was an appointment he expected life to keep. "I'm building something," he told me on our second date. "Not just a career, a name." I admired that. I came from practical people who fixed what was broken and kept going. Caleb came from wanting people who believed wanting hard enough made them special. I mistook his hunger for vision. That mistake would cost me 16 years. My father met Caleb on a rainy Saturday. Caleb shook his hand, looked around the repair shop, and said, "This place has character." My father nodded. "It has bills, too." Caleb laughed, but my father did not. Later, after Caleb left, my father asked, "Does he know how to be still?" I frowned. "What does that mean?" "He moves like a man trying to outrun a mirror." I rolled my eyes because I was young and in love and thought wisdom was just fear wearing old clothes. "Daddy, you always do this." "What?" "Look for problems." He wiped his hands on a rag. "No, baby. I look for pressure points. Problems find those on their own." Caleb proposed after 18 months. My father gave his blessing, but not easily. He sat Caleb down in the repair shop after closing, just the 2 of them. I never heard what was said. Caleb came out smiling too tightly. My father came out quiet. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "To never build a house with a woman and then call her a guest." I laughed. Caleb did not. That should have stayed with me. We married in a small church with blue windows. My father walked me down the aisle slowly, his hand warm around mine. At the reception, he danced with me to an old soul song and whispered, "If you ever need to come home, you do not need permission." I hugged him harder and told him I would be fine. He did not argue, but his eyes were sad. The first years with Caleb were not terrible. That is important to understand. People often think painful marriages are painful from the beginning. Some are, but many begin with laughter, teamwork, small apartments, shared noodles, hope, and promises made by people who either mean them at the time or believe meaning them for a moment is enough. Caleb and I rented a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. We had almost nothing. Our couch sagged in the middle. The kitchen faucet leaked, the bedroom window rattled when trucks passed, but I was happy, or I thought I was. Caleb had big plans. He wanted to start a supply chain consulting company. He said small manufacturers were losing money because they did not understand logistics. He said he could build a platform, then a service, then a national network. I did not understand all of it, but I believed in him. So when he quit his job to start Westbrook Systems, I stood beside him. Actually, I did more than stand. I carried. I worked full-time as an office manager at a medical clinic. In the evenings, I handled invoices for Caleb's company. On weekends, I helped him set up booths at trade expos. I answered emails when he was too tired. I proofread proposals. I learned bookkeeping from YouTube videos and corrected early accounting mistakes that could have ruined him. When the first investor meeting failed, I held him while he cried. When the second failed, I sold my mother's pearl necklace to pay rent. When the third failed, I took a weekend job coordinating events at a hotel. Caleb promised it was temporary. Temporary became our first 5 years. The company survived because I made sure the lights stayed on, because I called vendors before accounts went past due, because I negotiated payment plans, because I kept records. Caleb was too proud to admit he did not understand, because I smiled beside him at events where he said things like, "I built this from nothing, from nothing." I was standing beside him the first time he said it. He squeezed my hand under the table, as if that made it ours privately. But publicly, it was his. That was one of the early rattles my father had warned me to hear. I ignored it. Caleb's mother, Marjorie, entered our marriage like a slow leak in the walls. At first, she was polite. She called me dear. She complimented my cooking with surprise in her voice. She brought expensive-looking candles that smelled like judgment. Marjorie came from a family that had once had money, then lost most of it while keeping the manners of people who still expected servants to appear. She believed Caleb was destined for greatness, and she believed I was a useful but temporary bridge to that greatness. She never said that directly. She did not have to. At dinner, she would say, "Elise is so hardworking. Caleb needs someone like that while he builds. While. Not as he builds. While." At Christmas, she gave me a cookbook and gave Caleb a leather briefcase. At our 5th anniversary dinner, she said, "Behind every great man is a woman who knows when not to stand in front of him." Caleb laughed. I smiled. My father did not. He had come to that dinner, sitting quietly at the end of the table. After Marjorie's comment, he set down his fork and said, "Behind every great man is often a woman tired of being erased." The room went cold. Caleb said, "Malcolm, she didn't mean it that way." My father looked at him. Then she can say what she meant. Marjorie never forgave him for that. Neither did Caleb, though he pretended otherwise. The company began growing in our 8th year of marriage. A regional manufacturer signed a major contract. Then another. Caleb hired staff. We moved from the bakery apartment into a small house. Then from the small house into the brick colonial, with white columns and a wide kitchen, where he would one day place divorce papers in front of me. Success changed the air around Caleb. People started calling him visionary, strategic, a rising name in operations consulting. Business magazines wrote small profiles. He bought better suits. He spoke on panels. He learned to pause before answering questions, as if his thoughts needed room. At first I was proud. Then I began noticing the shifts. He stopped asking me to review proposals. Then he stopped inviting me to meetings. Then he hired a finance director and told me I could step back. "You've done enough," he said. It sounded like gratitude. It was actually removal. I was still working at the clinic then, but part-time, because Caleb said my schedule made our home life too chaotic. He wanted dinner ready when he came home. He wanted the house presentable for business guests. He wanted me available for charity luncheons where other wives smiled like polished glass. So I reduced my hours, then quit. That was the second biggest mistake of my life. Not because homemaking is small, it is not. Home is work, care is work, support is work. But quitting gave Caleb the power to describe my contribution however he wanted. And over time, he described it as nothing. At first he said it jokingly. "Elise keeps the house running, which means she keeps me running." Then later, dismissively, "Elise doesn't really handle business anymore." Then finally, cruelly, "You have no idea what pressure feels like. You live in the house I built. The house I built." I remember standing in the laundry room with a basket of his shirts in my arms, thinking of the pearl necklace I sold, the invoices I corrected, the rent I paid, the nights I held him while he shook with fear. But I said nothing, because by then, silence had become my easiest survival skill. My father noticed. He always noticed. One afternoon, I visited him at the shop. He was older now, slower, his hands stiff from arthritis. The sign outside still said Heart and Daughter Repairs, though I had not worked behind that counter in years. He watched me rearrange a shelf that did not need rearranging. "Are you happy?" he asked. I laughed too quickly. "Daddy, don't start." That was not an answer. "I'm fine." He nodded slowly. Fine is what people say when the truth needs a chair, but they refuse to let it sit down. I turned away. He came closer and placed a small brass key in my palm. A blue ribbon was tied around it. "What is this?" "A key." "To what?" "Home." I frowned. "I have a home." He looked at me with such sadness that I almost broke. "No, baby. You have a house. I am not sure it is home." I tried to give the key back. He closed my fingers around it. "There is a place outside town. Small cottage. Your mother loved it. I bought it before she got sick and kept it all these years. It is yours now. Deed is in the blue folder in my office safe." "Daddy, why are you giving me this?" "Because if you ever need to leave, I do not want fear making decisions for you." I was offended then. I thought he was doubting my marriage. Now I understand he was protecting my future. I put the key in a drawer when I got home and did not mention it to Caleb. Then my father died. It happened in the repair shop on a Tuesday morning. He had been fixing an old clock for Mrs. Hanley from 2 streets over. She said he sat down, placed one hand on the workbench, and looked toward the sign on the wall. Heart and Daughter. Then he was gone. Grief does not always arrive as sobbing. Sometimes it arrives as silence so complete that the world feels padded. I remember identifying his body. I remember choosing a coffin. I remember Caleb asking whether the funeral could be scheduled around an important investor dinner. He said it gently. That made it worse. At the funeral, Caleb stood beside me, but his phone kept lighting up in his pocket. Marjorie wore black lace and told people my father had been a simple man, but proud. Simple. I wanted to scream. My father had been more than every polished person in that room. After the burial, I went to the repair shop alone. I sat on his stool, touched the tools, opened the office safe, and found the blue folder. Inside was the deed to the cottage, and more. There were documents for Heartworks Holdings. At first I thought it was some small business paperwork tied to the repair shop. It was not. My father, the repairman everyone underestimated, had spent decades investing quietly in small manufacturing companies. He invested in tool makers, repair tech startups, rural equipment suppliers, replacement parts distributors, and later, software systems used by maintenance networks. He never lived richly because he did not care to, but the portfolio had grown quietly, patiently, stubbornly. At the back of the folder was a letter. My baby Elise. If you are reading this, I have gone ahead of you. I know you may be surprised by what I kept quiet. Maybe angry too. That is fair. I wanted you to know work before money. I wanted you to know people before influence. I wanted you to learn the difference between building and showing off. Heartworks is not enormous, but it is strong. Strong enough to give you choices. The cottage is yours. The shop is yours. The holdings are yours. And if Caleb has been honorable, you may choose what to share. But if Caleb has turned your love into a ladder, step down before he kicks it away. You do not have to beg for a place in a house you helped build. Come home when you are ready. Daddy. I cried until the room blurred. Then I did something that still makes me ashamed. I put the papers back. I locked the safe. I went home to Caleb. Why? Because grief made me weak. Because marriage had trained me to explain away my own discomfort. Because leaving would mean admitting my father had seen what I refused to face. Because sometimes we return to pain, not because it feels good, but because it is familiar enough to navigate blind. The year after my father died was the loneliest of my life. Caleb became colder, more polished, more distant. He traveled often. He stopped sleeping in our room some nights, claiming late calls. His company grew, but cash flow became strange. Vendors called the house. I found unopened letters from lenders in his office trash. When I asked, he said I was snooping. Then came Noelle Mercer. Noelle was a corporate restructuring consultant, hired to help Westbrook Systems prepare for a major expansion. That was the official version. She was 36, sharp, elegant, and always dressed in neutral colors that looked expensive without trying. She spoke in low tones, never wasted words, and had a way of making Caleb feel like he was the smartest man in the room. I met her at a company dinner. Caleb introduced her with pride I had not heard in his voice for me in years. Noelle has completely changed how we think about growth. Noelle smiled and shook my hand. Elise, I've heard so much. I had come to hate that sentence. Good things? She looked at Caleb. Important things. That was not an answer. During dinner, Noelle sat beside Caleb, not across, beside. Their shoulders nearly touched. She corrected him gently when he misstated a projection. He accepted it. From her. When I had corrected things years earlier, he called me anxious. After dinner, Marjorie pulled me aside. She's impressive, isn't she? Yes. Caleb needs impressive people around him now. I looked at her. What does that mean? She patted my arm. Only that some seasons require different support. Different support. That was how women like Marjorie turned betrayal into vocabulary. By winter, Noelle was everywhere. Her scarf in Caleb's car, her coffee order in his calendar, her notes on his desk, her name in his phone under NM strategy, as if changing a contact name could change the truth. One night, Caleb came home after midnight, smelling like expensive perfume and rain. I was waiting in the living room. He looked at me and sighed. Elise, please don't. I haven't said anything. You don't have to. Then answer what I haven't asked. He loosened his tie. There is nothing going on. Then why do you look guilty? He laughed coldly. I look tired. No, I know tired. No, I know tired. I lived with tired. I carried tired through the first 8 years of your company. This is not tired. His face hardened. You always bring that up. Because you keep forgetting it. He stepped closer. I have not forgotten. I just refuse to spend the rest of my life being held hostage by what you did years ago. Hostage. That word cut deep. So my sacrifice had become his prison. The next morning he left early. 3 weeks later he stopped pretending. Not fully. Men like Caleb prefer to keep one foot in denial until it becomes inconvenient. But the carelessness grew louder. Noelle called during dinner. Caleb stepped outside. Marjorie invited Noelle to a charity brunch and forgot to tell me. Staff at the company began avoiding my eyes. Then, on a Monday morning in March, Caleb asked me to sit down. I thought maybe he would finally confess. Instead, he served me a legal folder with coffee. The divorce papers. Marjorie. Noelle. The sentence, "You'll beg to stay before the week is over," and the brass key in my palm. That is where this story truly began. I did not drive to a hotel. I did not drive to my friend's house. I drove to the cottage my father had left me. It sat 12 miles outside town, past a road lined with pine trees and wild grass. I had not seen it since childhood. Back then, my mother called it the little blue place, though the paint had faded nearly gray by the time I arrived. The cottage was small, one bedroom, a kitchen with old cabinets, a screened porch, a stone path leading to a pond covered in green lily pads. The air smelled like rain, pine, and something peaceful I had forgotten existed. The key turned with a stubborn click. Inside, dust covered the windowsills. White sheets draped the furniture. The walls held old photographs of my mother laughing on the porch, my father holding a fishing pole, me as a child with missing front teeth. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Then I locked it behind me, not because anyone was chasing me, because for once, I wanted to know a door was closed by my choice. My phone rang 27 times that day. Caleb first, then Marjorie, then Caleb again, then a number I did not recognize. Probably Noel. I turned the phone off. That evening, I found canned soup in the pantry, still good by some miracle, and ate it from a chipped bowl while sitting on the porch. The sun went down slowly. Frogs began singing near the pond. For the first time in years, no one corrected my silence. I slept 9 hours. The next morning, I called a locksmith, then a lawyer. Then I called the one person my father had named in his folder, Mr. Samuel Price. He had been my father's business attorney for 22 years. His office was downtown, in an old brick building beside a courthouse. He was a thin man with silver hair, kind eyes, and the alertness of someone who noticed every word. When I arrived, he stood and held both my hands. "Elise," he said, "your father loved you very much." That was all it took. I cried. He gave me time. Then he opened a folder. "I assume you have read some of what Malcolm left." "Some." "Then let me explain the rest." The rest changed everything. Heartworks Holdings was worth far more than I had understood. Not billionaire money, not the wild kind of wealth that makes news anchors lean forward, but strong, private, deeply rooted money. Enough to own significant shares in companies Caleb's business depended on. Enough to control supplier contracts, logistics software licenses, parts distribution agreements, and a private credit line Westbrook Systems had quietly used during its early growth. I stared at Samuel. "Westbrook Systems used Heartworks credit?" "Indirectly," he said. "Years ago, your father made several introductions and guarantees." My stomach dropped. "Caleb knew?" Samuel's face tightened. "He knew some support came through private channels. He did not know your father controlled them." I thought of every time Caleb said he had built the company from nothing. Nothing had been my father quietly placing boards under a bridge Caleb thought he crossed alone. Samuel continued. "Your father did not want credit. He said if Caleb honored you, it would not matter who helped. If Caleb dishonored you, the truth would matter very much." I laughed through tears. "That sounds like him." Samuel slid another document forward. "As controlling beneficiary, you may leave the existing agreements in place, alter them, or terminate future support where legally permitted." I stared at the page. Westbrook Systems. Supplier Bridge Agreement. Renewal pending. When is this due? End of the month. My mouth went dry. Caleb had handed me divorce papers exactly 3 weeks before the renewal. No wonder Noel was in my kitchen. No wonder Marjorie was smiling. No wonder Caleb thought I would beg. He believed the house, the company, the money, the reputation, the marriage, all of it stood on his side. He did not know the floor beneath him had my father's name carved into it. What happens if I do not renew? Samuel folded his hands. Westbrook Systems will need to replace several key support structures very quickly. It may survive, but not without serious disruption. Would it be revenge? He studied me carefully. Not if the decision is based on risk, conduct, and your legal interest. Revenge asks, how can I hurt him? Stewardship asks, why should I keep protecting him? That sentence became my compass. I did not want to become cruel. I had lived too long with people who excused cruelty when it benefited them. So I did nothing quickly. I reviewed everything. For 2 weeks, I sat with Samuel, accountants, contract lawyers, and analysts. I learned the structure my father had built. I learned the difference between direct control and influence. I learned how Caleb's company had grown on agreements he never bothered to understand because he assumed he was too brilliant to need the scaffolding. Meanwhile, Caleb grew impatient. His messages changed. Day 1. Elise, stop being childish. Come home. Day 2. We need to discuss the papers. Day 3. Where are you? Day 4. My mother is worried. Day 5. This silent treatment proves my point. Day 6. Noelle says you may be experiencing shock. I can help if you let me. That one made me stare at the phone. Noelle says, the woman standing in my kitchen while I was handed divorce papers now had opinions about my emotional state. I blocked her number. Caleb emailed next. Long messages. Legal language mixed with old tenderness. He said we should keep things civil. He said he had never wanted to hurt me. He said he hoped I would accept the settlement because dragging things out would only damage both of us. Then, on day 9, he wrote, I know you're scared, Elise, but this little disappearance won't change reality. You need stability. I can still make sure you're taken care of if you cooperate. I read that email 3 times. Not because it hurt, because I wanted to remember the exact sound of a man mistaking control for generosity. On day 14, he found the cottage. I was inside reading through a Heartworks report when a car rolled up the gravel drive. I looked through the curtain and saw Caleb step out. He wore casual clothes, but not comfortably. Caleb never knew how to be casual without styling it first. He knocked. Elise? I did not answer immediately. He knocked again. I know you're in there. I opened the door but kept the chain fastened. His eyes moved over my face, then past me into the cottage. For a moment, he looked confused. Maybe he expected me to be falling apart. Maybe he expected empty wine bottles, tissues, darkness, proof that I could not exist without him. Instead, I had clean floors, fresh flowers from the yard, stacks of documents, and a kettle on the stove. What is this place? He asked. My home. His mouth twitched. Don't be dramatic. You keep using that word when I make decisions you do not control. He exhaled sharply. Can I come in? No. That startled him. Elise. No. He looked around, lowering his voice though no one else was there. This has gone far enough. I agree. Good. Come home and we can discuss the terms properly. I have a lawyer now. His face hardened. You don't need a lawyer. I know. That is why I hired one. He stared. For the first time, he realized I was not performing pain. I was preparing. His tone softened. Look, I know the morning was difficult. The morning you brought your mother and your mistress to watch you serve me divorce papers. His jaw tightened. Noelle is not my mistress. Then why was she there? She is part of my transition team. I almost laughed. What a beautiful title. He stepped closer to the door. I made mistakes. Did you? Yes. Name one. He blinked. What? Name one mistake, Caleb. He looked irritated. This isn't productive. No, it is revealing. His softness vanished. You know what your problem is? You want me to crawl and apologize so you can feel powerful for once. I smiled sadly. No, I wanted that years ago. Now I want you off my porch. His face changed. Elise, you have no idea what you are doing. I do. You will regret turning this ugly. I looked him directly in the eyes. You turned it ugly. I just stopped decorating it. I closed the door. He stood outside for several minutes. Then he left. The next week, I declined the renewal of Heartworks' support arrangement with Westbrook Systems. Not suddenly, not illegally, not emotionally. Proper notice, clean documentation, full compliance, no shouting, no threats, just a door closing. At first, Caleb did not understand what had happened. Then his CFO did. Then Noelle did. Then the calls began. Caleb called Samuel's office first, demanding clarification. Samuel gave him nothing beyond formal language. Noelle requested a meeting with Heartworks representatives. Denied. Caleb's lawyer sent a letter implying retaliation. Samuel responded with 10 pages of documentation showing independent business reasons, conflict concerns, and risk exposure related to Caleb's divorce filing and company instability. By the end of the first month, Westbrook Systems had lost 2 supplier advantages. By the second, a logistics software partner renegotiated terms. By the third, a manufacturer Caleb had taken for granted paused a major contract. The world did not explode. It loosened, one screw at a time. Exactly as my father said things do. Caleb became frantic. He did not show that publicly at first. Publicly, he remained polished, confident, visionary. He posted business quotes online. He attended panels. He smiled in photos with Noelle. But privately, the emails changed. "Elise, we need to talk about your father's holdings." Then, "Why didn't you tell me Malcolm was involved with Heartworks?" Then, "Do you realize what your decisions are doing to people's jobs?" That one almost got me. Almost. Because the employees mattered. They always had. Many of them were good people. People with families, mortgages, sick parents, children in school. I did not want them harmed because Caleb had built his company like a monument to himself, instead of a home for others. So I did something Caleb never expected. I offered transition support directly to the employees and smaller vendors affected by Westbrook's instability. Through Heartworks, we created a fund to help subcontractors diversify. We offered employment pathways to key staff if Westbrook downsized. We supported vendors Caleb had delayed paying. Not for him. Around him. When word of that spread quietly through business circles, Caleb's carefully built image took a hit. Because people began asking an obvious question. Why was Elise Hart, the woman he dismissed as irrelevant, protecting his ecosystem better than he was? Noelle tried to spin it. Marjorie tried to gossip it away. Caleb tried to claim I was unstable and vindictive. Then Samuel released nothing publicly because we were not messy. But facts have a way of traveling without being pushed. By summer, Westbrook Systems lost its expansion deal. By fall, Caleb's board requested a full review. By winter, Noelle resigned. That shocked him more than the business losses. I heard about it from an old company employee named Teresa, who called me one afternoon. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said. "Then don't if it puts you at risk." "No, I want to." Noelle left, took a consulting role in Dallas. She told people she couldn't tie herself to a sinking ship. A sinking ship. There are women who want a man, and there are women who want the deck he is standing on. Noelle had wanted the deck. When it tilted, she jumped. Caleb called me that night, from a new number. I answered, because I recognized the area code and because a strange calm had settled over me. "Elise," he said. His voice was different, not soft, hollow. "Yes?" "She left. She left." I said nothing. Noelle left. I heard. He gave a bitter laugh. "Of course you did." Silence. Then he said, "Did you plan this?" "What?" "All of it. Heartworks, the contracts, the vendors, turning people against me." "No. Don't lie. I did not plan your collapse, Caleb. I only stopped preventing it." That sentence seemed to take the air from him. For a long moment, I heard only his breathing. Then he said, "I thought you would come back." "I know. I thought you needed me." "I know. I thought—" He stopped. "What?" "I thought you were weaker than this." There it was, the closest thing to honesty he had given me in years. I closed my eyes. "So did I said. He did not respond. For one brief second, I felt grief rise, not for the marriage as it ended, but for the marriage I once believed we had. The apartment above the bakery, the noodles, the late nights with invoices, the young man crying in my arms because investors had rejected him. The woman I had been, so certain love could build enough shelter for both of us. "I did love you," he said. I believed that, strangely. But love that cannot respect you becomes another kind of hunger. "I loved you too," I said. "Then why are you doing this?" "I left, Caleb, that is all. Everything falling apart after that belongs to what you built without me." He hung up. The divorce finalized in February. I reclaimed my name, Elise Hart. Seeing it on the final decree made me cry harder than I expected. Not because I hated the name Westbrook. I had carried it for 16 years. It held memories, some painful, some tender. But Hart was mine before anyone taught me to shrink. After the divorce, I moved fully into the cottage. I restored it slowly, painted the kitchen a warm yellow because my mother had always loved yellow kitchens, repaired the porch rail myself, badly at first, then better, after watching old videos and hearing my father's voice in my head telling me to measure twice. I reopened Hart & Daughter Repairs. Not exactly as before. The front of the shop became a repair cafe and training space where people could bring broken household items and learn basic fixes. Behind it, we ran small business workshops for women rebuilding after divorce, job loss, or financial control. Heartworks funded the program, but I named it after my father's sign, Hart & Daughter, because I was done standing behind men who called my work support. Caleb's world did not disappear completely. It changed shape. Westbrook Systems survived, but smaller. He stepped down as CEO after the board review. The press release called it a strategic leadership transition. Teresa sent it to me with one line. Translation, consequences. Marjorie sold her condo and moved in with her sister. I heard she told people Caleb had been betrayed by ungrateful women. I wondered if she meant Noelle or me. Maybe both. One afternoon, almost a year after the kitchen scene, Caleb came to the repair shop. The bell above the door rang while I was helping a young woman fix a toaster. I looked up and saw him standing under the old sign. Hart & Daughter Repairs. For a moment, time folded strangely. I saw the young man who had once walked in with a broken lamp. Then I saw the man who had placed divorce papers in front of me and waited for me to beg. He held something in his hand, an old desk lamp, the same style as the one from the day we met. "Elise," he said. The young woman beside me looked between us and quietly carried the toaster to another workbench. I wiped my hands on a cloth. "Caleb," he looked around the shop. "You reopened it." "Yes. It looks good. Thank you." He stepped closer and placed the lamp on the counter. "It's broken." I looked at it. "I can see that." He smiled slightly, but it faded when I did not smile back. "I thought maybe you could fix it. There are intake forms by the door." He looked down. "I didn't come for the lamp." "I know." Silence stretched between us, full of old ghosts and new boundaries. He looked thinner, less shiny. His suit was still good, but not new. His eyes had changed most. They no longer carried the easy arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him applause. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You do. I don't know how to make it right." "You don't." He nodded slowly, accepting the blow. "I thought everything was mine because people said I built it." I said nothing. "But I didn't build it alone." "No. I erased you." "Yes. And Malcolm." My throat tightened at my father's name. Caleb looked toward the old workbench. He saw me, didn't he? From the beginning. A sad smile crossed his face. I hated him for that. I thought he looked down on me. No. He looked through you. Caleb closed his eyes for a moment. I deserved that. For the first time, I heard no performance in his voice. Maybe it was real. Maybe losing everything he thought made him powerful had finally introduced him to himself. But apology is not a key. It does not automatically reopen doors. "I am sorry, Elise," he said, "for the papers, for Noelle, for my mother, for making you feel like you were lucky to stand beside me when I was the one standing on your foundation." I swallowed. The shop felt very quiet. "I hear you," I said. He looked at me, waiting. For forgiveness, maybe. For comfort. For some version of the woman who used to rush in and soften every hard moment. I did not offer it. Not because I wanted to be cruel, because I had learned that peace does not require immediate access. He nodded after a while. "Can the lamp be fixed?" I looked at it. Most things can, but sometimes repair costs more than replacement. He smiled sadly. "That sounds like Malcolm." "It is." He left the lamp. Then he left the shop. I fixed it 2 weeks later and had it delivered to his office with an invoice. He paid on time. I think my father would have liked that. People often ask if I am happy now. The answer is yes, but not in the way I imagined happiness when I was young. It is not loud. It is not perfect. It does not arrive in a white dress or a big house or someone else's last name. It is quiet. It is waking up in the cottage with sunlight on the floor. It is opening the repair shop and hearing the bell ring. It is watching a woman who thought she knew nothing about tools repair her own chair and laugh like she has repaired part of herself too. It is signing Heartworks documents with a steady hand. It is having dinner with friends who do not measure my worth by who I am married to. It is being alone without feeling abandoned. That is the part Caleb never understood. He thought leaving me alone would punish me. He did not know I had been lonely beside him for years. He thought I would beg to stay because he believed the house, the money, the company, the status, and the name were all shelters I could not survive without. But the shelter had never been him. It was my father's lessons, my mother's memory, my own hands, the key with the blue ribbon, the cottage waiting beyond the pines, the work I knew how to do, the truth I finally stopped ignoring. Caleb thought I would beg. Instead, I left, and his world fell apart because it had been balanced on a woman he taught everyone not to see. That is the secret about people who hold everything together quietly. They may not look powerful. They may not sit at the head of the table. They may not interrupt, boast, threaten, or demand credit. But remove them, and suddenly the lights flicker, the bills surface, the schedules fail, the lies lose structure, the rooms feel colder, the world that seems so solid begins to rattle. Then one day, the wheel falls off. My father was right. Most things do not break all at once. They loosen first. So listen early. Listen when someone laughs while taking credit for your work. Listen when their family insults you and they call it peace. Listen when they say you do not understand the pressure after you carried it for years. Listen when another woman is given respect you begged for. Listen when the word ours quietly becomes mine. And when you finally hear the rattle clearly, do not wait for the wheel to crush you. Pick up your key. Open your door. Leave, not to punish them, to save yourself. Because the life waiting for you may be smaller at first. A cottage instead of a mansion, soup instead of dinner parties, silence instead of applause, a repair shop instead of a company gala. But if it is yours, truly yours, then it is not small. It is the beginning of standing upright again. And when the people who thought you would beg finally realize you were the foundation, you do not have to return just because they discovered gravity. Let them learn. Let the house shake. Let the world they built on your back fall apart if it must. You are not cruel for leaving a place that only valued you when you were useful. You are not selfish for locking a door that kept letting disrespect in. You are not weak because you stayed too long. And you are not heartless because you finally left. You are human. You are learning. You are allowed to come home to yourself.